Good afternoon, listeners. A warm welcome to each and every one of you. Please sit back and enjoy today's webinar session where we discuss hazards and near misses, but with a twist. Today's session is brought to you proudly by the National Road Safety Partnership Program, or NRSPP, in collaboration with ARB Group and, of course, Robert Bosch Australia. Before we move on with the presentation, may I ask for your attention for just a few short moments while we cover off a few formalities and housekeeping items. My name is Angela Ratz, the online training coordinator here at ARB Group. I'll be co-moderating today's session, but mainly here for tech support if needed. Please feel free to contact me at any stage if I can help. I would like to extend a big thank you to my colleague Jerome Karslik for joining me in the studio today to moderate the session. Jerome, before we move on with the other housekeeping items, could you give us a rundown on what the NRSPP is for those hearing it for the first time and your role within it?
Certainly. Thank you for that, Angela. Basically, the National Road Safety Partnership Program, or NRSPP, or NERSP, it's all about basic collaboration. It's an industry-led initiative which brings together governments, researchers, industry, all around improving workplace road safety. It's all about sharing knowledge, how organisations approach and manage different risks, good practice examples. And what we're sort of seeing here today with Bosch is just really how they're stepping forward and recognising leaders in their areas and why they're going about and doing it, because everyone who's part of it sort of recognises road safety as a shared advantage, not a competitive advantage. And so it's all about the learnings and sharing. So I really look forward to hearing about today's program, and my job is to try and manage this growing beast. So thank you.
You're doing a great job, Jerome. All right, so this session is being recorded, and the video together with the presentation material will be sent to you on conclusion of the session. For first-time webinar attendees, please see some helpful tips on your screen. Please note the questions box in particular, or the chat, where you will type through any questions, comments or feedback for the presenter or perhaps Jerome and myself. Now, speaking of the presenter, please join me in welcoming Richard to the microphone. Welcome, Richard. Can you tell us a little bit more about yourself and what our listeners can expect to learn from today's session?
Thanks, Angela. My name is Richard Van Beveren. I'm the Health, Safety and Environment Manager at Bosch Australia. I've been with Bosch for about 10 years, which amongst my colleagues just clears me of the new starter status. Robert Bosch Australia is quite a diverse organisation here. We have around about 800 people in Australia, and that's working in a range of things like our chassis systems division, which is most closely associated with the NRSPP work. But we also have diodes, manufacturing, and we have our trade sales divisions, power tools, thermotechnology, automotive aftermarket. So it's quite a diverse business here. What I'd like to go through today is hazard and near miss reporting at Robert Bosch Australia. The twist, I guess you'd refer to, is treating those as a good thing or a positive indicator. And I'd like to go through why we've chosen to do that, how we've done that, and then what sort of results we've seen from taking that approach. So let's go back a step. What I'll do over the next few slides is go through at a fairly high level, and I've got a few breaks in there for questions as we go. I'd prefer to go then into more detail in response to questions that people have got. So there are probably three key reasons if I'm looking at why did we choose to take this approach. And the first one of these is looking at our organisational culture, and specifically our culture in relation to health, safety and environment. This is a slide that if you've been in health and safety you may have seen. It's on the Safe Work Australia website. There's a reference there for Hudson. And it describes steps, if you like, of organisations, divisions, teams, even individuals, how they operate in relation to health and safety. So down towards the bottom you've got a reactive culture where, it's important, we deal with it when it happens. In the middle you've got probably where a company like Bosch operates very well. We have systems. We've got systems in place to manage everything. Moving a bit beyond there, you've got a proactive culture where you're doing things about them before they happen, and the aim is to end up at a generative culture. It's just part of how we do business. We're not trading off quality against cost, against safety. All of them are just part of the way we do our work. And reporting hazards, doing something about them, moves us very much towards that proactive stage, and is also seen as the key part of this is just the way we work around here. The other one, and it sounds obvious to say it, one person's near miss will be another person's injury or spill. I've got even in my presentations a pyramid type approach where people will say, well, for every 300 hazards or near misses or minor incidents, you can expect one severe one. I don't so much subscribe to that approach. I'm not sure it's that valid. I certainly don't think it's that helpful. I'd prefer to look at it as a common cause. If I can get people to think about, well, what was the event, what was the action, or what was the environment that created this hazard, how did we get to that point, then in looking at the common causes, that also gets people thinking about where would I put in place controls to prevent that happening next time. The last aspect is that, and it's also an easy statement to make, that prevention is preferred, but particularly when it comes to injuries, you can't always fix them. A back injury will be with somebody for life. Environmental damage can't always be undone, or it's extremely expensive. Just ask BP.
That's what sprang to my mind as well.
So you can't. You don't have that luxury, if you want to call it that. You can't always fix problems. And even if you can, the last point there, you'll very rarely be in control at that point. If you have a serious incident, you will have regulators, customers, family. You'll have a whole lot of people who are desperately wanting to get information from you. A regulator, if you've had a spill or something like that, will say, okay, you need to, or even an incident, you stop what you're doing. Your business is stopped until that regulator or the business is satisfied that you're doing things okay. So you want to do all that you can to avoid that, both from looking after people and to look after your business. So in terms of a few key fundamentals that we had in place for this program, we already were and still continue to treat hazards and near misses as incidents. We don't have a separate process for them. We escalate them the same way. In a similar approach to WorkSafe or the courts, it's not so much about the outcome, it's about, well, what is the gap? And if the gap is serious, then I expect to see them investigated the same way. I expect to see root cause analysis. I expect to see manager involvement. And even if nothing's happened yet, if it's a clear gap, then we expect to see corrective and preventative actions taken. There's no difference. We treat them the same way. Having said that, it is very important not to overcomplicate. Probably the easiest way to discourage somebody to proactively report somebody, or something, sorry, is to turn it into a mortgage application. So if I've got a 10-page form that needs to be filled out because I've taken the time to think about what could happen next time, I'm really not likely to report it. And I also, on the flip side, don't want to see hazard reports where the same amount of effort could have just sorted the problem out. So there is definitely a balance to strike there. So to encourage reporting, and this is what we implemented at Bosch and where we've seen the response, key one is keep it simple. So we still have the same process expected, but we've created an easier entry point. We had an existing system for our facilities maintenance where you could report that a light's not working or I need something cleaned up on site, and we added into that, okay, here's a HSE hazard. We get that in our department. If we think it warrants further escalation, we'll do that, but it means people don't have to go to a whole lot of trouble. It's really easy. It's just on their screens, type in a few comments, send it off. Thank you very much. The second point there I can't stress strongly enough. There needs to be a no-blame culture in place, and people need to see action taken. So the areas where we've seen this work best are the ones where the employees have been able to see, I reported this, something was done about it, it's changed. If you don't have that, the program will fail within weeks. To help encourage, managers to pay attention to it as well. We embedded it in KPIs. So, and this is, I'm happy to talk about this as well. We did set targets. We set targets for hazard reports. We did that carefully. We did that with a lot of discussion in the leadership group, and it is about leadership. It's not about managers doing their thing. It's about leaders presenting this and owning this program in the right way. And we said we'll play the managers off a little bit against each other. So in the management group, we'll say, okay, here, how many hazard reports did you have in your area? How many did you have in yours? There's a little bit of competition there, and it discourages silly reports. If a manager has to defend, well, why did you make up these numbers with a report about I don't know, I've got a few examples, I won't dob people in, but we didn't see silly reports coming in, and that was also very positive to see. So we started this quite a few years ago, and this, I'll leave this up for a little while because this really goes or highlights where we saw the results. We didn't see silly reports come in. Looking on the right-hand side there, the dark bars are the hazard reports that we had coming in over the last few years across the whole business, and side by side against those are the actual injury and illness reports. So you can see as the hazard reports have gone up, 93, 140, 138, and we're well on track to achieve that 150 target for 2016, there's been a corresponding significant decrease in the number of injury and illnesses coming in. I've no evidence to suggest that we've got skewed reporting going on. We're still getting reports in. There isn't a problem there with people saying, oh, I'm not going to report that, we'll just deal with it. And it's provided really an excellent pathway to improve our risk assessments. We're also at the bottom point there. A lot of play areas have done their work, they've done their risk assessments, they've got their controls, they've got their SOPs. People are now much happier about raising a concern and saying, well, I'm not quite sure that's right. The process owner then goes back to their original risk assessment, and they're improving their processes without doing so reacting to somebody being hurt or something going wrong. It really has been very, very good result for us. And a lot of the business areas now, it is just the way it's done. We don't need as much encouragement or forcing people to submit these reports. People will see something, people will notice something, they'll think about it, and they'll report it. It is becoming the way we do business, which has been great to see.
Well, those uber long reports, or rather way of reporting, I think that's a massive deterrent for people to actually want to let the company know of what's going on. It can be a bit ridiculous with some companies.
Having said that, we certainly still put people through that if it's warranted. So if it's warranted and we don't see a quick fix, or there really are some questions to be answered about, well, how did we get to this situation, then we'll still push it through the 8D or a root cause analysis process. But yeah, we don't put that in front of people at the first step. I'm happy at this point to pause. My intention is to go through a little bit more detail about the experience in specific parts of the business, but I'd be happy to pause and take some questions at this point.
Yeah, we're on straight away here. Why was there such an increase in 2014? I guess it's referring back to the figures here.
To be honest, 2014 was when we managed to get it into the goal agreements of most of the high-level managers, and it really was, we sat down at our annual review and said, okay, what are the key things we want to focus on this year? And that was one of them. We said, okay, to get this culture moving, or to keep it moving in the direction we want this focus on hazard reporting. Go into areas, look at not just what is not okay or is everything okay, but look for what are the improvement opportunities, what could be done better.
And what were some of those? What are some of the near miss reports which pop up, and are they being quite regular?
Yeah, I'll go through. There's a couple of those. So I'll flip back and forwards a little bit, but I'm happy to go to that now. So if we talk about our chassis systems division, I'll go back to logistics, which I just flicked through. Our chassis systems division didn't have a problem, if you like, with injury and illnesses. They already started from a very good and low base for injury reports, and yet they've also managed to increase their hazard and near-miss reports, and they haven't put in silly stuff. They've looked at what type of vehicles are they driving, how are they fitted out. If I've got a cargo barrier in the vehicle, but I'm hauling equipment that's too big to fit in the cargo barrier, then I either need a different vehicle or I need to move the cargo barrier so it sits forward. I'm not encouraging people to take out the cargo barriers, which was happening. We have a lot of people who are working overseas, embedded engineers, different automotive companies. They have a challenge with working hours, both at those locations and then checking back in with the local business. And that was raised as a hazard. So what can we do there to improve things? A few other bits and pieces there. We had simple stuff that came up. We've got a few people out at a remote test track. I said, oh, what can we do about that? And they said, well, you could install a fire-ready app. This is down in Anglesea. And so simple stuff that worthwhile. It's not a silly question to raise, and we're working better as an outcome.
We just got a question came through from Petra. I hope you got your name correct. Did you get some extra WHS resources, i.e. staff, to manage the increase in reporting that's sort of generated at all?
No, we didn't. So I run, I want to call it lean, quite a small team. The role of the health and safety department in our business is not really to look after health and safety of people. That's not our role. That's the manager's role. And so part of the leadership group commitment was to say, okay, look, this is not something for the health and safety department to deal with. We provide that system, we provide that input, but what are you as a business leader going to do about it? So all of these that are on the screen at the moment weren't actions that were taken by the health and safety department. They were questions raised by an individual in that part of the business, and then they were dealt with by that business. They were escalated to a manager and dealt with at that level. So it didn't put a significant extra burden on the health and safety department.
And you mentioned earlier that culture. And I think after hearing that the average life sort of span at, like, you're a young employee being there for 10 years, so I gather that's a pretty incredible culture that you guys must have. Creating that just culture, was that already there, or has this helped sort of strengthen that?
I think the culture varies quite significantly across different parts of the business. If I use our logistics area as an example, they have seen this program really help with people taking ownership of health and safety. So for them, it really has encouraged a culture shift. They had quite a different culture a few years ago, but the focus on, look, we want you to report these hazards, and we as a leadership group will demonstrate that we're reactive to the reports is correct. We will take those on board, and they've demonstrated change. For them, it really has been part of that culture change.
Fantastic. Well, remember, ladies and gentlemen, that webinars work best when they're interactive, so please don't be shy. If you have any questions or feedback you'd like to share with us, please type that into the questions box and we'll address them as they come in. So back to you, Richard.
Thank you. Just to finish up my part of the presentation, where we're looking at taking this from here, I certainly don't expect that the treating hazards and near misses will continue to be highlighted as such a great thing going forwards, because ultimately it's not a great thing if people are nearly hurting themselves and there's a bit of luck involved in them not doing so. So it's not something that we will keep in place forever, I think. Now that I'm fairly comfortable it's starting to be embedded as a culture, we will look at things perhaps like, okay, let's distinguish a hazard from a near miss. Let's treat a near miss as, well, that's actually a bit more severe than just you coming up with an improvement idea, and maybe that's not such a great thing. So I've already started to look at, for different areas, okay, rather than bundling together, let's have a look. So for logistics, for example, they're continuing to report hazards, their near misses are coming down as well, so that's good. Also, to not discourage initial reporting for people who might have been hesitant to do so, I've been a little bit less, put a little bit of pressure on people to really, okay, let's do a root cause analysis. Let's really figure out what's going on here. If you've identified a hazard, you've put a fix in place, then for now, if it's a simple fix, that's quite okay. But going forwards, we'll probably push a bit harder on, let's treat this exactly, really exactly the same way as somebody being hurt. So we're not going to keep doing things just as we are. We review this every year to see where we can push it best next.
Well, I guess, what are some of the key sort of lessons that you would, if other organisations are looking at setting this up, where would you sort of recommend, now that you've gone through this whole pathway, where would you say this is where you should really focus on at the beginning?
I think, for me, it's being able to demonstrate that responsiveness. It's one thing as a leader to say, okay, great, we want you to report your hazards, we want you to report your near misses. If the organisation isn't perceived as doing something about that, then it's not going to work.
I can't argue with that.
It makes sense. Richard, just keen to know, are you the only Richard at Bosch, or are there more good men and women like yourself?
Oh, there are plenty more good men and women like myself. So I'm part of I look after the site here in Clayton and Dandenong. We have a regional organisation here in Australia, and the people in that regional organisation are also very much pushing the same message, if you like, so that, yeah, I'm not working in isolation.
Well, what sort of training do you look at sort of providing the supervisors, managers, in sort of moving this forward?
It's important that the managers present this the right way. So if you've got a manager in the business who says, oh, look, this is something that the Health and Safety Department wants us to do, we need to make up some numbers and come up with some ideas for a hazard report, that's not ideal. That's not going to work very well. It's got to be something that the leaders of the business really personalise, and I think that's very easy to do with health and safety. You're talking about things that have a permanent impact on people or a permanent impact on the environment. We're not here to muck around. We've got a business to run, but doing so safely and really getting people to think about, we're talking about people going home at the end of the day in the same state, or if with a bit of luck, even better, than when they came to work. We're not talking about a couple of percentage points on some obscure graph. We're talking about not hurting people or not damaging the environment.
And do you think people have become, through the near-miss reporting, do you think they've improved their ability to identify solutions so they can avoid it happening in the future?
Definitely, yeah, definitely, I think so. And it's important that once you keep bringing it back, I'm not after just numbers on a page. I'm after things that actually make a difference. Don't waste your time or my time or the business's time dealing with silly little things to make up numbers. We're dealing with important topics here, and if they can see that, you're not just a safety person with a clipboard, if I want to call it that, that's really important. You're there to help the business. You're not there to obstruct. You're there to help the business do things better.
And save lives, geez.
Do you provide supervisors with root cause analysis trainings from Petra again?
We do, definitely, yes. So the way we expect to see that from a health and safety point of view is very closely aligned to our engineering parts of the business that work in the automotive industry. So to those parts of the business, we use the same language. We expect to see A3 sheets. You can use your 8Ds. It's the same language. To other parts of the business, we have that sort of training. So we provide trainings to managers so that they understand the expectations for that process, and then we have specific people in the business who are trained as incident investigators or who have root cause analysis training.
Awesome. And another question here, did it promote healthy competition?
Yes, definitely. So in the leadership group we have, nobody wants to be seen as holding back, or if one division is reporting much better results than another, then that's a good thing. I think that is healthy competition.
And do you think with near-miss reporting, if you think outside the box, looking at other sort of organisations, is it sort of a scalable sort of thing? So I guess for some organisations which are right out high-risk sort of environments, these guys quite often have very strong systems in place, including that. I hear from other organisations where they're very office-based and they do very little. What's the point of having near-miss reporting?
Yeah, I would agree. So if I look at our business, we've got people doing testing cars out on a test track at high speed in all sorts of environments. We have a manufacturing environment that has nasty chemicals and machines that bite. So that's going to be a very different environment to an office. To have the same sort of expectations on an office environment as those more high-risk businesses isn't going to work. So there does need to be a difference because we are talking about, well, what's the actual risk? We want to be dealing with stuff that matters.
Absolutely, and a question's come through from Stuart. Thank you, Stuart. How do you measure hazards and near misses for staff who are required to drive on a public road or roads for work? Staff usually won't admit to driving poorly, which is a fair point.
That's a good question.
That's an excellent question. It's actually, I should have put that on where to from here, because that's certainly an open area for us where I think there's always more work. So as a business, we're certainly aware of when speeding fines and things like that come in, but that's being quite reactive. So we provide a fair bit of input to training, so people who do drive on the roads regularly will get specific defensive driver training. We set very clear expectations about what we want to see in people who are driving both our vehicles and their own vehicles for work purposes. But yeah, I don't have a good answer there. We're not currently having cameras in cars or telemetry back to base or something like that. We're not at that point. Oh, actually, having said that, though, we have had hazard reports in from drivers on the road. So we've had what initially people would think was well, why would I report that? They've reported a wallaby on a road that they've had a near miss or that they've hit. And I said, well, that helps, because if I get 4 reports in from people on the same road down to our test track, for example, then we know that that's a higher risk area. Do we say to people, well, drive a different path? So there's been some engagement from people who are on the roads.
That's a fantastic point, because it's one of the questions that pops up quite often. How do you manage that risk around animal strikes, getting out there? And it's one of the sort of quick Q&As we're developing on that response, journey management plan, time of day. But I don't think a lot of people, it's a very complex one. Do you look for technology to help or yeah?
I mean, well, Bosch and Automotive, we're the kings of technology. In that Anglesey example, what that part of the business is doing, I believe they've just said, well, this particular entry road is to be avoided at these particular times of day. We have a different route that people can take where that doesn't occur as often. So that one in that case has been fairly simple. We certainly also don't encourage, we say, if you're on a trade sales route in far north Queensland or remote area, then don't drive at dawn and dusk, just don't do it. And we have an expectation that the managers don't then put schedules in front of their people that force them to do that.
Interesting. Well, if anyone does come up with any questions, or perhaps you'd like to implement a similar kind of initiative in your workplace, and you'd like to bounce some ideas off the good man himself, Richard, his contact details were on the opening slide and also the closing slide, and I think he would be okay with having been contacted. Yep. Excellent. I'm glad, because the details are up there anyway, so there's no way out. Sorry, Richard.
Sorry. Oh, yep, there they are.
There we go. Thank you all for joining us today for this webinar presentation. The recording and the presentation material, as I mentioned earlier, will be available for review, so please do keep an eye on your emails. Once this webinar closes down, you will see a survey pop up on your screen, and it's just a few short questions there, ladies and gentlemen. If you could fill that out for us and let us know how we travelled today, we'd be very, very grateful. Richard, thank you so much for your time and effort coming into the studio and preparing today's presentation. I trust our audience found it very insightful. And yeah, we look forward to having you back, hopefully, in the near future.
No problem. I'd be happy to. Yeah, and if anybody's got questions, happy to get a call or answer an email. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you, Angela.